Hi Year 2, welcome to our Lunar lesson for this afternoon. Now, I'm going to let you into a little bit of a secret. This Lunar lesson is one of my favourite lessons to teach to Year 2 and I'm so excited to deliver it to you today. It actually makes me a little bit sad that we're not in the classroom and that I'm having to do this by video, but I'm sure that you are going to love it. Now, our topic, we started it last week, is the Victorians. And in today's lesson, we are going to learn a little bit more about what life was like for a Victorian child. Last week, we looked at the monarch of the time. Who is the monarch during the Victorian times? Queen Victoria. She is the person on the throne. She is in charge. And last week, we looked at her and her life. And this week, we're going to look at the life of a Victorian child. Here are the two things that we are going to know by the end of the lesson. The first thing that we are going to know is the difference between Victorian and modern children like you. We are also going to know that poorer children had to work to help to support their families. Okay, here is a picture. I would like you now to look at this picture. I want you to think about who you can see in this picture and what you think is happening. If you take a closer look, you will see that there is a lady stood on the doorstep. There is also a little boy standing in front of her, and I can see a child peering around the door too. I'd like you to think about some questions for me. I'd like you to think if you've got any questions about this picture. And if you have, I want you to pause the video and maybe write one of them down. I also want you to think about looking at this picture. What does it make you think? What do you think is happening? Again, pause the video and write down what you think is happening. The final thing that I want you to think about is what can you see? So just like I did at the beginning when I told you about the things that I could see, I'd like you to just pause the video and maybe write down one or two of the things that you can see in this picture. Okay, now I know how much you like it when I tell you a story. So in today's lesson, I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story and I am going to say, let's say that I am the woman in this picture. Let's say that this is me. Now, you know it's not really me, but I want you to imagine that that person is me. Let's say that we are in a time over a century ago, hundreds of years ago. Queen Victoria is the monarch on the throne, the person in charge. And let's say that we are in this rundown house. So as you can see, it's not very nice. And all of my children are running around and they are thin and hungry. And I am very upset. Now, I am upset for a couple of reasons. People have been banging on my door asking for money and I don't have any to give to them. My husband, he can't find any work because he's too ill and he can't get out of bed because we think he has a disease called cholera. And the disease, cholera, is around during this time because we don't have any fresh water to drink. And if we drink the water from the water pump, sometimes it can make us quite ill. And we think that he has cholera. Now, I live in this house, the one that you can see in the picture. And the landlord, the person who's in charge of my house, has told me that if we can't pay him to live here, then he will ask my whole family and all of my children to be evicted. That word evicted means that we would have to leave. I'm really scared and I don't know what to do. Pause the video here. What would you do if this was you? What would you do? Hopefully, you've maybe thought of some things that I could do, but I'm going to tell you about something that happened one day whilst I was in my house. So one day I was in my house and someone is banging on the door again. And I didn't really want to open the door because of how worried I was feeling, but I answered it anyway. And at the front door, a strange man is standing there. It's the man in the picture. And he says that his name is William Wire. And he tells me that he's a sweep master. And I've heard of that job before, a sweep master, because we have chimneys in our houses, and I know that a sweep master is in charge of all the boys who are chimney sweeps. He's the boss and they go out and they'll clean chimneys. And he's told me that he wants to buy my little George. And that's because he's a sweep master who's in charge of all the chimney sweeps in London. William says that my George, the little boy who's in the picture right now, he says that my George will have a better life, and I don't know what to do because I love him very much and he's only 6 like some of you, but if he stays here with me, we might be made homeless because we can't afford to pay to stay in our house anymore, and actually I wouldn't want him to catch the same disease that his dad has got. Maybe it is time that he got a job. Maybe it is time he started to work, because in the Victorian times, child labour is normal, and other boys around here where we live have been working since they were 4. Take a look at the little boy in the picture who's carrying all the things in front of him. He's been working since he was 4. Maybe it is time George got a job because now he's 6. Only rich boys go to school, and there aren't any round here anyway where we live. I wonder if he did go to work with William Wire, if I'd ever see him again. Should I sell him? What should I do? Pause the video here and think about if you've got any more advice for me. What should I do? Okay everyone, thank you for all of your suggestions, but I've made my decision. I've decided to sell my George. It's such a difficult decision, but I honestly think it's for the best. He will have a better life because he'll have a job, and Mr. Wire, the man in the picture right now, has also promised that he will look after him. He says that when George's brother is old enough, or a little bit older, that I could sell him too. If I wasn't living in this poverty, if I wasn't this poor, I wouldn't have to sell him, but I desperately need the money to keep my house and look after George's father. Do you think George's life will be better that I've made this decision? Pause the video here and have a little think. Okay, I'm not the lady in the picture anymore, I'm Miss Buckley now. Back to normal. The picture of the boy, George, what's happened to him? What did his mum just do? Pause the video if you need a little bit longer to answer my question. What did this little boy's mum just do? Now, this little boy's mum has just sold him to a sweep master. The man in the picture is a man named William Wire, and he's in charge of all the chimney sweeps in London. He's in charge of all the little boys who go and clean chimneys. And this is what they did in the Victorian times. It was perfectly normal for children to work, and sweep masters would go around really poor areas, especially on the outskirts of London, and they would knock up on the doors and they would ask the mothers of the children, to sell their little boys so that the little boys would become chimney sweeps. And they'd make them lots and lots of promises. They would tell them that they'd have a better life. They would tell them that they would be looked after, and they'd also tell them that they could eventually see them again. But maybe for some little boys who became chimney sweeps, this wasn't the case. Now, that must have been a really, really tough decision for the mother to make, especially during the Victorian times. And she told us that she was really poor. She told us that Georgie's father was ill as well. And she told us that she didn't have any money, and she thought that this was the best decision for her to have made. Pause the video. Do you think she's made the right decision? What do you think? Okay, I told you at the start that our job in today's lesson was to think about how your life is different to the life of a Victorian child. I've already said that during the Victorian times, child labour is perfectly normal. So children as young as 4 years old would have a job. They would go out and earn some money to support their families. Now, on the Teams channel, the Lunar channel, there is this worksheet that I've uploaded onto the screen now. If you can't print it, it's absolutely fine, just use some paper. Now, there are 3 things that you need to do in today's lesson. The first thing you need to do is answer the first question, and it says, when was the Victorian era? And we've been looking at that, haven't we? And we know that the Victorian era was from 1837 to, I wonder if you can remember the year that Queen Victoria died. I'll start writing it anyway, just in case. Oh, your handwriting should be much better than mine. Till 1901. That is the Victorian era, 1837 to 1901. Now, the next thing that I'd like you to do, job number 2, is to look at the picture, the one that I shared with you along with the story that I've just told, and I'd like you to write me a few sentences to explain what happened to the little boy in the picture. So you might describe about him living in poverty, you might describe the sweep master knocking on the door and asking his mum to sell him. You might talk about how his dad had cholera, that was the illness, the disease that his dad had, and that his mum had no choice but to sell him to get some money. You might mention that he's now going to become a chimney sweep. You might mention that he's only 6 years old. Those are some things that you remember. The magic about having this on a video is that you could actually go back and revisit that story that I've just told you, maybe listen to it again for a second time so that you could answer that question. The last job that you've got to do, number 3, is it says, how is your life different to a child from the Victorian times? Fill in the table below with some ideas. So I want you to think about how your life is different to a Victorian child. Do you have to go to work? No, you don't, do you? That's one difference. So you might choose to draw in this table. You might choose to draw or write your ideas. I don't mind if you draw and colour in your pictures. I don't mind if you write your ideas. You might, for your first one, you might mention that something that you do is go to school. Not at the moment, but we're learning online. So you might draw a picture. I can't draw using this tool, but you might draw a picture of school in this box here, because the mother in the video then, the story that I told you, she mentioned how only rich children went to school, only rich boys went to school actually, and there wasn't any around the area. So something that's different is you attend school and a child would work. So you might even magpie the image of the little boy that's on the screen, and he's carrying all those things. So you might draw a picture of school, you might draw our St. Anne's badge, and on the other side you might draw the little boy carrying all the things because he has to work. And then I want you to think about some other differences that we might have. Look at his feet. What is he not wearing on his feet? Think about what you're probably using to listen to me now. You might be using a phone or a laptop or an iPad. Do you think George would have had one of those during the Victorian times? Definitely not. So think about some of the ways that your life is different to a Victorian child's. Okay, thank you for listening to my story, boys and girls. I will also be linking a video about the Victorian times that you could watch and listen to as well if you want to find out just a little bit more about Victorian children. Okay, thank you for listening so beautifully. I told you it was a good one. I hope you enjoyed it, and I can't wait to see your responses to the worksheet. Thank you, everybody.